The Starr and D'Amico Show is brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. If you're looking for quality gear without overpaying, shop cheapesttshirts.ca. Huge selection for men, women, and kids. Tees, hoodies, headwear, bags, and more. Proud Montreal business. Order today, ship today, delivery tomorrow. That's cheapesttshirts.ca. Local, fast, and affordable. Brought to you by instacustoms.com. Do you need custom gear from a local Montreal business? Instacustoms.com has you covered. Custom shirts, hoodies, hats, and more made your way. Fast turnaround, great quality, and proudly Montreal-based. Check out instacustoms.com. Brought to you by Cabletel. For trusted alarm systems in Quebec and Eastern Ontario, choose Cabletel. Over 20 years of expert installation and top-tier protection for homes and businesses. Check out Cabletel.com. Email them info@Cabletel.com. It's Cabletel. Peace of mind you can count on. Brought to you by Morella's Steakhouse. Looking for an unforgettable night out? Morella's Steakhouse on Highway 132. It's just 15 minutes from Montreal, serving up premium cuts and bold flavors, and no tax on your bill. Book your table tonight at morellassteakhouse.ca. Taste excellence tonight. Brought to you by Little Bear. Give your pet the best with Little Bear Pet Supply. It's a proudly family-owned business here in Montreal for over 30 years. Chuck, Evie, and their all-star staff have you taken care of with all the top brands at the best prices, and they really care for your pets. Shop online at littlebearonline.com or visit them on St. Catherine across from Westmount Square. It's Little Bear Pet Supply. Brought to you by McLean's Pub. Head over to McLean's Pub, 1210 Peel Street in the heart of downtown Montreal. Great food, cold drinks, and big games on all the screens. McLean's Pub, good times and great company. And welcome to the Starr and D'Amico Show. I'm Shaun Starr. There's my partner in crime, Marco D'Amico. Lots to get to, and a reminder right off the top, we're going to be here live in the aftermath of Canada and the men's national program opening up their Olympic tournament in pursuit for gold coming up Thursday. As soon as that game is over, D'Amico and Starr will be here live. We hope to see you in the live chat as we look forward to Canada's opening game against Czechia. Don't forget that live performance. That means I encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel so you get those notifications and you don't miss any drops or any live programming. Marco, the sprint to the finish line for the Montreal Canadiens is going to be so fun. Buckle up. Let's get on this ride with 25 games to go when they resume on February 26th. And listen, this is in the category of good problems to have. The Montreal Canadiens are third in the National Hockey League in terms of goals per game. You got Colorado, you got the Lightning, and then it's the youngest team in hockey. But the good problem is guys are going to return. Alex Texier, Alex Newhook. And how do the Canadiens figure out that puzzle? What's your initial thought on how MSL is going to structure his forward line combinations? Let's start there.
Well, I think we have to look at this under the basis that there aren't any trades, right? Because that would also change the whole dynamic of the team.
Yeah.
The way that I see it right now, the way that they finished off the season, I think Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Kirby Dach is the top line. I think makes sense. I think, those three have had instant chemistry since, the first time that they were tried. And I don't feel like they'll move away from it unless someone better comes along and is able to take that role via trade. So I think we could basically lock that line up, in my opinion. The kid line, 20, 91, and 93, I don't think that's moving either. I think the fun part of this conversation is when we get to lines 3, 4, and who the extras are.
I don't disagree with that, but I guess I don't know if there's a strong argument to be made only because of the 25 games left once it opens up against the Islanders on the 26th. That, I mean, it's going to be a sprint to the finish line, and I know the Canadiens have a high percentage of making the playoffs as you and I talk about the projected lineup card, right? So logically then, there's no room for experiments, right? Like if somebody in the chat is like, no, move Slav back down to move him up to the top line, put Alex Newhook on the second line. I'm not here for that, only because of how much the games will matter between the 26th and the end of the regular season. I think that's the right way to look at this.
If the Canadiens are on the trade market looking for a top 6 forward, I don't think that they would necessarily feel like that's the right chair for Alex Newhook in a healthy lineup. Now, if there were injury, that's a different story, right?
Correct.
And that's where depth is valuable and you can move guys up and down the lineup. But when you start getting to a point where you make the playoffs and you're hoping to win around, Hopium can't help you as a general manager. Like, you can't just hope for the best. I know that there's general managers that are like, just get into the playoffs and anything could happen. respectfully disagree. I don't think that's a winner's mentality. I'm of the mind that if Alex Newhook is on your third line, you're in business in terms of the depth of your forward group, right? I think that's fair. I think, where the Canadians are right now, I think, the way that Alex Texier was playing, I think if he's on your third line, you're in business. And I think this is exactly where the Canadians are kind of at right now in terms of trying to figure out how to piece things together, who to piece things together with. And I think this is where the interesting conversation ends up happening is that I think from a top six perspective, the only way it moves is via injury or trade. I think that top six you leave alone. Where it really gets interesting is the opportunity in the bottom six. And then obviously when we start talking about the defense.
And I would also think having wave of, the first line roles, the second line roles, having a third line that can play with speed and the occasional scoring touch, which, before we get to, I guess, how the lineup card shakes out, as I led you in with top 3 scoring team in the National Hockey League, also inside the top 10 on the power play. Do you think the second wave of the power play also perhaps would influence MSL in terms of, let's say, Brendan Gallagher's role? Let's start there.
Well, I think, going into the playoffs, Brendan Gallagher's experience is going to be helpful. I know there's a lot of people that are harping on Brendan Gallagher right now. I think he's probably one of the players that's going to benefit the most from this break. You look at the way that Brendan Gallagher played down the stretch after the Four Nations, he was great for the Montreal Canadiens. That line that he was on with Christian Dvorak and Yoel Armia was excellent. And I just feel like Brendan Gallagher is that kind of player where when you play a condensed schedule like this, it kind of exposes where he's at in his career. But things are naturally going to slow down a little bit with this 3 weeks that he has off to be home, relax. If there are injuries, maybe heal them. But he was on a heater right to end before the break. So I think, for all intents and purposes, if you're Martin St. Louis right now, you want to keep him at least, worst case in a fourth line role. And then at that point you rotate. There are some non-negotiables in this lineup. And I think it's worth talking about. But definitely a guy like Brendan Gallagher, I think he brings that experience. He brings that fire. He brings you into the fight. And I think that would be interesting. And, for me, the pairing or at least the trio of Danault, Anderson, and Gallagher, to me, seems like the ideal veteran shutdown line that Martin St. Louis tends to create, later into the season to try and lean on a little bit more than the top line to allow the top line more offensive deployment.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me you're of the mindset that 3 of the 4 forward combinations arguably are locked in, lines 1 and 2, and now we talk about the veteran line of Evans and Gallagher, Gallagher and Anderson. And so
that's the way I see it.
So beyond that, then, so by the process of elimination, how delicate is the Zachary Bolduc situation for such a young player that Ken Hughes went out and traded Logan Mailloux for? How delicate is that?
I don't necessarily think it's super delicate. It's a role situation, right? Like, who's left? Jake Evans.
Yep.
Alex Newhook. Alex Texier. And Zach Bolduc. Those are your 4 other players. And Michael Hage will likely finish the season in Montreal as well. And obviously Joe Veleno is your 14th forward, 15th forward in this case.
Sure.
Just for the purposes of this conversation, after the trade deadline, there is no 23-man roster limit. So, they're allowed to have 14, 15, 16 forwards as long as they don't bust the cap.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, I think I would still go with Texier, Evans, Newhook as the other bottom 6 line because they don't want to split up that veteran line. The most optimal line I could have from an offensive perspective, and I think this is where the discussion needs to have, I would love to see Danault with Newhook and Texier. I would love it because I think even though if you look at the stats right now, I think Danault generates more situational offense or offensive chances right now than Jake Evans does.
Mm-hmm.
I strongly believe that. But the value that he has is also from the defensive side. And I just don't know that you'd be doing those 2 other players favors in Texier and Newhook and putting them in those situations. That being said, that trio to me is the trio that is more likely, that is Newhook, Deneau, and Texier, to be an offensive and defensive third line in terms of the combination.
Again, though, I mean, it's such a tricky balancing act because, we talked briefly there about the second wave of the power play for a top 10 power play team at the break. Mm-hmm. But at the opposite end of the spectrum, more or less, is a PK unit that I don't think anybody would describe as being elite. Therefore, we bring in the balance word into this equation and into this conversation of having, Jake Evans, who you just talked about, who is, elite at certainly reading situations shorthanded, but also in his own end in key faceoff draws. I mean,
all four centers on the Montreal Canadiens play on the penalty kill.
Yeah.
Simple as that. So
I don't necessarily more time for Suzuki then at that point. Yeah.
I mean, to me, I would like to see Suzuki play more penalty kill like down the stretch.
Yeah, he would agree.
Because yeah. And I just feel like it will, like, if Suzuki can continue to play on the penalty kill as he has, in the month of January, he's got a legitimate shot at the Selke. And it would just be so unfortunate for the player because Barkov is out and he's just like the perennial player to win this award. It would just be so unfortunate for Suzuki to not be considered a front runner for the Selke, because I know that many of those voting on the Selke will take the fact that he hasn't played that much at penalty kill and use it against him in the voting. So I would very much like to see him at least get a fair shot at this trophy, and that the team use him the way that, for example, Team Canada is likely to use him on the penalty kill. So it is an interesting dynamic, but when it comes to the bottom six lines, you also want to create kind of an identity situation. And I think that outweighs the offensive side of the puck, where I think the Canadiens are going to want to have that shutdown veteran line. And so, although I would personally go 85-24-15, I do believe that Martin St. Louis is going to go 17-24 and 11.
If you like what you're hearing, you like what you're seeing, please give us a like and a subscribe to the channel. Getting more people's eyeballs on the product certainly is good for this growing Habs community. So thanks for being with us. I got two more thoughts on the forward group before I think we touch on Struble, Jackeye, and the depth defensive situations. And then obviously we'll finish up on the goaltending in the sprint to the finish line with 25 games to go when they get back to face the Islanders on February 26th. And I remind you, Marco and I will be here following Team Canada and the Men's Olympic Hockey Tournament, following their games Thursday and Friday. And of course, they play Sunday as well. But before we get to all of that, let's finish our conversation on the forward group. You just touched on, I guess the complexion of the bottom six. And you and I have talked about the subject of grittiness, grinders. How do you feel about that with Newhook and Alex Texier bound for a return? I mean, does that meet what you're looking for?
Well, I think that's a huge boost for a team to get two top nine forwards that come back, especially a guy like Alex Newhook, who plays with such speed and can play a role, maybe take a load off of some of the other players on the defensive side of the puck. And I think that's really why I could see the Canadiens going either way and flip-flopping Jake Evans and Phil Deneau down the middle. I think that's the benefit of being able to have a guy like Phil Deneau, is I think it'll also, especially when you talk about the playoffs, right? It's set plays. So it's going to also depend on where the puck is being dropped. If it's on the right side, Jake Evans probably going to take that. If it's on the left side, they're probably going to go with Phil Deneau. If it's the third period, heck, they may even go with both and have two centers there just in case one gets thrown out of the faceoff circle. It's going to be situational. But when you're looking at the 12 men on the sheet at the beginning of the game, who slots where? As of right now, unless there is injury, I feel like Zachary Bolduc is the odd man out, unfortunately. And that's unfortunate because he has been playing much better and the details are definitely there. But in the playoffs, and this is kind of why I say it's the land of opportunity is the playoffs. The moment a team loses a game or two, you get in, you have the opportunity to make a play, to make your presence felt. You look back at the way that Cole Caulfield did not start for the Montreal Canadiens in the 2021 playoff run, came in, couple of games later and was an immediate impact. Remember that overtime breakaway 2-on-0 from him and Nick Suzuki. You just need an opportunity. And I feel like that's what Zachary Bolduc is going to need. He's just going to need an opportunity. And I think Martin St. Louis is not going to be shy to give it to him. He's not a guy that I feel is going to be very forgiving in the playoffs if he feels a player is this or a player is that. And, death, taxes, and injuries in the playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. And that's where you're going to want that kind of depth. And that's not an indictment on Bolduc today. There's a very real chance that this is in a conversation later on. But with the top six the way it is, we know that the chemistry on the top line hasn't worked. So you're not going to try that again. You're not going to break up the kid line. Do you realistically play him over Alex Newhook or Alex Texier the way that both of those players have been playing this season? I'd have trouble. Where I would think it could happen is if ever they start trying to rotate in and out Brendan Gallagher. That's the way I could see it. And I think that's where his in would be, is rotation or an injury. What I would find to be very interesting at that point is they may then flip-flop Danault and Jake Evans' line mates to make things a little bit more offensive for Phil Danault.
I assume it's not a coincidence as we wrap up our discussion on the Canadiens lineup at the forward position. I haven't brought him up. You just went through the 12 forwards and no one said Patrick Laine's name.
Well, I mean, we've kind of already discussed this in terms of the Canadiens' intentions right now. We'll see what happens between now and, the 26th of February. I personally don't think that he'll be on this team, after the trade deadline. That's what I'm being told. Things can change very quickly. Remember, Jake Evans had his entire apartment packed ready to go before he extended with the Montreal Canadiens about a year ago. So it takes one phone call, takes one thing to change. So that's why I'm saying there's an expectation that he is not on the Montreal Canadiens come the trade deadline. And then, of course, there's the expectation that Michael Hage will join in April at the end of his NCAA season. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts. I know that there's going to be complaining in April. I'm sure of it. If the Canadiens, if and when, I don't want to offend anybody, if and when the Canadiens make the playoffs, people are going to be complaining about why this player isn't on the fourth line. I get it. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the reality of a competitive team. When you have, the luxury of having 6 legitimate top line wingers, well, it's going to make inserting the 7th a little difficult if he isn't able to play a role. And I think, that's kind of where the problem is. But again, that depth comes super in handy the moment you run into any adversity. And that's what you got to keep in mind.
Let's get into the topic of defensemen. I think it's maybe easier in terms of the 5 guys that are locked into spots. And obviously I have Alex Carrier in my 5. The question is, a guy let's start with Arber Xhekaj. He's slotted into 50 games this season, but when you break it down in his last 15, he's played more than 10 minutes in just 6 of his last 15 games. Marco, there's a job to be won here. What's your read on whether it's Struble or Xhekaj? And almost reminiscent of the conversations we've had about the goaltending. Who wants the crease? Who's going to step up and take it by the scruff of their neck and say, this is my position? I mean, it's fair to say that for the 6 defensemen, Struble nor Xhekaj have with authority taken command of that position, brother. What's your read on how this plays out? Because if a perfect world exists, not that it does, but in this hypothetical, if a perfect world were to exist, everybody that pays attention knows they need the style of Arber Xhekaj big time.
I'm sorry, the South Park reference broke me. Well, I'll tell you what, one of the main reasons why I think Arber Xhekaj would be my 6th defenseman is because people will respect his authority when he is on the ice. And I know that there's a lot of complaining of the fact that he's only getting 12 minutes a game. Look at championship Stanley Cup teams and look at how they divvy up the time on ice during the playoffs. If it's a 60-minute game and it doesn't go to overtime, generally speaking, the top 2 pairs will get 50 of the 60 minutes, and the third pair will get anywhere between 8 to 12. So it's perfectly normal. And there's nothing wrong with that. If he is, he is a bottom pair defenseman right now, but he brings an element that the rest of that team, outside of Caden Gooley, when healthy, does not bring. So I'm 100% going with Arbor Jacki to start the playoffs as of today. 100% with Alex Carey.
Even though only once in his last 6, Marco, he's gotten over 10. Like the last
I don't
game
care.
we saw him play, he played less than 6.
I don't care. That's probably what the bottom pair is going to get used for in the playoffs. That's a reality. If it wasn't for Alex Carrier's penalty kill minutes, he'd probably be in the same boat of playing 12 to 13 to 14 minutes a game in the playoffs. But because he has that extra usage, that extra role that Arbor doesn't, and that they don't use Lane Hudson in, it offers him opportunity for more minutes. So that kind of makes sense. Arbor doesn't have that option. He doesn't have the special teams option to give him those extra minutes because they have, I think it's fair to say they do have better defensemen suited for that role. Mike Matheson, Noah Dobson, Caden Gooley. And then, you can make the debate for Alex Carey. But one thing I find Alex Carey does really well is the penalty kill when he plays the proper system and doesn't overcommit. But Jacki, same concept, right? So where do you fit them in and how do you bring them into that experience? Mm-hmm. I like the idea of having Arbor Jacki in those games because those games get tighter.
Agreed.
He's stronger along the walls. One of the best things that he's improved on this season is his timing for his open ice hits. Not simply just time and place, but also synchronizing the timing so that what we saw last year is he'd go for the big hit, but the guy would skip right by him before he crunched him against the boards. Now, how many times have we seen it in the month of January where a guy's coming down his wing and he just finishes him? That kind of box out, that kind of crush, and then take the puck, go back the other way. That element is exactly what you need on the bottoms on your third pair. For me, it's 48-53 to start the playoffs. It's 8-21 on the second pair in Matheson and Gooley. And then it's Arbor Jacki, Alex Carrier to start. And I would go as further to say this. It is a real debate for me whether it's Struble or Engstrom as the seventh defenseman. Like I'd be interested to see if Struble is still with the team after the trade deadline.
I think that's definitely a topic we will have time to explore between today and the March 6th NHL trade deadline, with again the congestion as we went through at the depth chart of the forward combinations, arguing Arbor Jacki as someone that the Montreal Canadiens are going to need come playoff time. Your point about how tight games are played, I think, is a well-made one, which takes us into the schedule, right? 26th, 28th, March 3rd, 6th, 7th, 10, 11, right? So buckle up, because here we go to the stretch run once it begins, which takes me to the goaltending position. I mean, Sam Montembeault, the last game we saw, was so good against Winnipeg in the 5-1 win, right? And Jakub Dobeš had played in 5 of the last 6 games. I think my gut tells me, Martin St. Louis and the coaching staff collectively are probably going to go back to a rotation again, as opposed to leaning. And listen, the play of these goaltenders will dictate ultimately what they do. But I think on the onset, I think that's how it begins. What's your read on mapping out the goaltenders? And once again, that battle of the crease between Dobeš and Montembeault.
I think it's going to come down to who's hotter going into the end of the season. I think it's as simple as that. I mean, they come back to back in California against the Ducks and the Kings. So that's going to happen. They come back east side and they play the Leafs on March 10th and the Senators on March 11th, another back-to-back. And oh, wait, the Sharks at home and then the Ducks at home, 14th and 15th, another back-to-back. So they've got 3 back-to-backs that I've just enunciated to you guys in the first, 9 games back. They've 6 of them are in back-to-back situations.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And then it doesn't end there. March 28th, March 29th, back-to-back. April 4th, April 5th, back-to-back. It's just relentless. Even
so they have 6 back-to-back in the final 25 games. Six back-to-backers.
It's nuts. It's nuts. So that being said, I don't think they're running with anybody. I think it's simply just going to be a go, 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 go. And they're going to see at that point who's winning you games, who's winning you games consistently, and who's winning you games ethically. I'm not talking about winning games where you win 6-5. I give a hoot about those games.
A hoot.
I'm talking about a hoot. Ooh. And so, look, let's just calm down, cuckoo bananas.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is it doesn't matter what the stat line is. It's who's winning you games in a way that is consistent and that would give you confidence that they would be able to do that in an even hotter setting like the playoffs, especially in the Bell Center. And
I got to
my
tell you, I
two
love this
cents,
conversation. Yeah.
my two
Go ahead.
cents,
Yeah.
I don't know, just because he's had the carpet ripped out of him a couple of times this season, I'd love to see Jakub Delbish do it.
Well, I think you know where I stand on that subject. I don't know what we can read into this. I mean, the fact that they play as many back-to-backs in the final 25 games, I don't think skews towards, favoritism. But again, if one goaltender can't stop a beach ball, and I think the numbers are crazy, right? I mean, if they were getting like 885 save percentage numbers, I mean, when the Canadiens I think have 25 wins when they get that level of goaltending, not 920, not 930, 885. And they win a lot more than they lose. So, I mean, those are the numbers, full stop. So, who's going to step up? Who's not? And I think that's the money takeaway. And I think that also applies to me to the rest of the team in front of the goaltenders. There are opportunities, and who's going to step up and seize the moment and help bring this team back to the playoffs and level up from last year's miraculous run post Four Nations. Because here they are again. I think it was 27 games after Four Nations. Now we're in that 25 game window once they resume on the 26th. And I got to tell you, I love this conversation. I think this is so fun, Marco, to talk about such a talented group. And I'll end as I began. These are good problems to have because I think competition, as most athletes, professional or otherwise, knows, competition is a good thing because it forces you to step up.
Yeah, like also kind of lends to the idea that the Canadiens, like when we broke it down the way we broke it down, the Canadiens, based on that, are looking to improve, is with the scoring forward in their top six. I think it's evident in the way that we talked about it. Ideally, depending on what the offer is, Kirby Dach gets bumped down and you end up having a line that includes Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook. And those two have always kind of had good chemistry. And then your fourth line can be, Alex Texier with Josh Anderson, two really strong forwards from a two-way perspective. Now, Josh Anderson in the playoffs, you got to have him in the lineup. My 2 cents. Sure. And then after that, you have to have the difficult conversation with Brendan Gallagher. And I think this is where the Canadiens would be going if they're able to find a trade that is both beneficial in the short term and the long term for the organization. Until then, I think we'll see exactly the lineup that I discussed today with Struble and Budzuk as the odd man out to start.
And until then, we shall reconvene following Canada and Czechia Thursday live with Starr and D'Amico. Marco, lots of fun as always. Like and subscribe, turn those notifications on because we got daily content around the Canadiens and, of course, the Olympics as well because we're not going away. Good stuff, man. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, guys. Enjoy the Olympics.